The sun lingered over the savannah like a tired ember, tinting the horizon orange and red, when the dog appeared. It was a slender mongrel, with short, coarse fur, marked by scars that spoke of fights over bones, nights without shelter, and long days of hunger. It wandered near the edge of the village, sniffing the air for any scraps that might soothe the emptiness in its stomach. But that afternoon, the scent that reached it was not of meat, nor of human fire. It was the raw smell of desperation. Following its scent, it crossed the dry bushes until it found its source, a small body lying among the tall grasses. The dog stopped, suspicious, ears pricked, tail low. Before it, a cheetah cub. It barely had the strength to lift its head. Its golden coat, speckled with black spots, was dull with dust. The ribs jutted out beneath the thin skin, and the eyes, large and amber, shone with fear and exhaustion. It let out a weak meow, more a lament than a threat, and tried to growl, but its mouth only produced a hoarse breath. The dog's instinct screamed at it to turn away. This was not its kind. It was wild, a natural enemy, a creature made for hunting. But another deeper voice spoke louder, the memory of its own cubs, lost long ago to hunger and hardship. It approached silently, lowered its head, and sniffed the little one. The smell of dried blood mixed with weakness broke something inside it. Instead of teeth, it offered body heat. It lay down beside the cub, pressing its back against its back to warm it against the falling cold. At first, the cheetah shivered, trying to crawl away, but soon, exhausted, it gave in. It huddled against the dog and closed its eyes. His heart was still beating rapidly, but he was no longer alone. As night fell, the stray dog rose and with his mouth grasped the loose skin on the puppy's neck, as a mother would when carrying her young. Carefully, he began the walk back to the village. He had no clear destination, only that to leave him there would be to condemn him to certain death, from the jackals already prowling, the vultures waiting above, or simply from hunger. Reaching the first huts, some villagers saw the scene and widened their eyes. "It's madness," they murmured. "The dog brings a predator into the house." But no one dared stop him. There was something about that sight. The lean, sturdy dog, carrying a dust-stained puppy in its jaws, that aroused more awe than fear. A man stepped forward, a peasant with calloused hands. He crouched before the dog, who reluctantly set the puppy down. The puppy emitted a soft whimper. The man, moved by the scene, brought a bowl of warm milk. The dog watched intently as the man brought the liquid to the cheetah's lips. Smelling the scent, the cub raised its head with effort and began licking, slowly at first, then eagerly, as if life were once again igniting in its chest. The stray sighed, lay down beside the little one, and with its rough tongue, cleaned the dusty fur. People gathered around, murmuring. Some feared. Others saw a sign, perhaps a blessing or a curse. But that night, under the flickering firelight, no one dared separate the two. And so began the improbable. The dog, accustomed to solitude and struggle, had chosen to become the father of a predator who would one day be faster and stronger than itself. The cub, condemned to die alone in the grass, had found a guardian in the most unlikely of beings. In the silence of dawn, as the moon rose and the crickets sang, the two slept side by side. The dog dreamed of times when he had cubs, and the cheetah, perhaps, dreamed of a mother he would never know. Fate, in those fragile hours, had woven a bond that neither time, nor instinct, nor the jungle itself would be able to undo. The village woke each morning to a sight they never grew used to: a stray dog and a cheetah cub, tumbling together in the dust. The cub had grown stronger in a matter of weeks, his ribs hidden now beneath new muscle, his fur sleek and spotted like dappled sunlight. His legs, though still clumsy, already carried the promise of speed, while his amber eyes gleamed with a fire that had once been dimmed by hunger. The dog, his ribs no longer so visible thanks to scraps from the villagers, taught him, in his own way, They played in circles, chasing one another across the yard, rolling in mock battles that ended with tongues lolling, paws batting gently, tails whipping like banners. The cub pounced with claws sheathed, learning restraint. The dog growled in jest, never in malice. To the villagers it was like watching two brothers inventing a new language made of movement and trust. Still, doubt simmered. Around the fires at night, men shook their heads. "It cannot last," they warned. "The cub is wild. One day his teeth will remember what they are for." Mothers pulled their children closer when the cheetah ran too near, and elders muttered that keeping such a creature was tempting disaster. Yet their eyes betrayed something else too, wonder. For every time the cub nestled against the dog's flank at night, for every time the dog stood between curious strangers and his spotted charge, the villagers glimpsed something more than instinct. The cub learned more than games. He followed the dog on his daily scavenging runs, trotting behind his scarred legs, copying the way he lowered his head to sniff, how he circled cautiously around goats without startling them. Though a cheetah's blood longed for the chase, he learned patience first, discipline second. He grew not only on meat and milk, but on the example of loyalty. There were moments that startled even the skeptics. Once, when a group of children teased the cub by waving sticks, the dog stepped between them, growling until they backed away. Another time, when a snake slid across the yard, the cub leapt clumsily but fiercely, pinning it until the dog pulled him back. The villagers laughed nervously, muttering that the wild was awake in him, but none could deny the bond. At night, by the faint glow of lanterns, the dog curled tightly around the cub, as if he were still fragile. The cub, despite his growing size, pressed close, purring softly, his head resting against the dog's chest. Their breaths fell into the same rhythm, steady and sure. To the villagers, it became harder to dismiss. Fear turned slowly into respect, then into quiet admiration. Perhaps instinct was not so rigid. Perhaps in rare corners of the earth, love could bend the rules of the wild. And so their shared childhood passed, a season of play, of lessons written in paw prints and laughter, of a bond growing deeper each day. The cub was no longer the dying scrap of life the dog had found in the grass. He was becoming something greater, because he had been raised not by teeth and claws, but by devotion. The cub became a shadow of fire and speed almost overnight. One season he was clumsy, tripping over his own paws, and the next he was gliding across the savannah like the wind itself. His body stretched into lean, perfect lines, his spots sharpened into clear rosettes, and his stride carried the effortless grace of a predator designed for the chase. Yet for all the wildness ripening within him, he never strayed far from the old dog. Each hunt began with instinct, the stalk, the burst of speed, the leap, and ended with something that astonished the villagers, the cheetah returning, dragging a hare or antelope fawn, not to eat alone but to share. The dog, grey now around the muzzle, limped to meet him, tail wagging, and together they ate beneath the acacia trees. It was as if the cheetah believed his success was not complete until it had passed through both their mouths. But not all were convinced. Some villagers whispered again of danger. "He grows too powerful," they said. "What if his loyalty breaks?" Yet whenever a stranger approached, the cheetah's reactions silenced them. He would not bare his teeth at the humans who had once fed him. Instead, he would circle back to the dog, nuzzling the scarred survivor as though the dog were his anchor. There were moments when his instincts pushed the boundary. He would freeze at the sight of goats wandering too close, eyes narrowing, tail twitching. The villagers held their breath. But then, before instinct tipped into action, the dog would bark, a sharp command, and the cheetah's gaze would soften. He would look back at his guardian and walk away. Each time it happened, disbelief rippled through those who witnessed it. The bond was stronger than blood. One afternoon, a group of young men decided to test the cheetah. They shouted, waving sticks, trying to drive him off. The dog, slower now, barked furiously but could not chase them. The cheetah, however, did not flee. He planted himself in front of the dog, head low, tail lashing, his eyes burning with a warning that needed no translation. The men stopped, the sticks lowering in trembling hands. When they retreated, the cheetah relaxed, rubbing his head against the dog's shoulder. The message was clear. He was no pet, no prisoner, but neither would he allow harm to touch the one who raised him. The villagers' fear began to turn into reverence. The sight of them together, predator and protector, wild and stray, was no longer seen as an accident, but as something larger, almost sacred. Children whispered stories of how the cheetah owed his soul to the dog, how their spirits were bound like brothers. Elders nodded, for they had seen enough of life to know that love often rewrites the rules nature sets. The cheetah was no longer just a survivor of chance. He was proof that devotion, once planted, grows deeper than hunger, stronger than instinct. And every time he pressed his massive head against the aging dog's side, purring like a kitten once more, the villagers understood. This was not the end of their story, but the beginning of something the world would remember. It happened on a moonless night, when the savannah was cloaked in silence and the village fires burned low. The old dog lay by the veranda, his body stiff from age, his breathing shallow but steady. The cheetah rested nearby, curled like a golden flame in the dust, his ears twitching to every distant sound. Then the stillness shattered. Hyenas. Their laughter rose from the tall grass, sharp and cruel, carrying closer with every heartbeat. Their silhouettes flickered in the darkness, lean bodies, jaws heavy with hunger, eyes glowing like embers. The villagers stirred, peering nervously from behind their fences. The hyenas had come for easy prey. They smelled weakness. They smelled the dog. The cheetah rose in a single fluid motion, his spine arching, his tail lashing through the night air. He placed himself between the hyenas and the veranda, his slender body stretched tall, his eyes lit with a fire the villagers had never seen before. A rumble began low in his chest, not the playful purr he once gave as a cub, but a growl deep and resonant, the voice of a protector. The hyenas circled, their laughter breaking into snarls. They outnumbered him, their teeth clicking, their bodies weaving in and out of the shadows. The old dog tried to rise, his bark hoarse, but his legs trembled, and he fell back to the earth. The cheetah glanced once over his shoulder, and something passed between them, a silent vow. When the hyenas lunged, the cheetah became a storm. His speed was lightning, his claws slicing through the dark. He struck the first attacker with a leap so fast the villagers gasped, his teeth sinking into its shoulder. The hyena yelped and fled, blood spraying across the dust. Another snapped at his flank, but the cheetah twisted mid-air, raking claws across its muzzle. Dust rose in choking clouds, the air alive with snarls and screams. The villagers gathered, torches flaring, shouting encouragement as the cheetah fought like a creature possessed. Each time a hyena tried to slip past, to reach the old dog, the cheetah blocked it, his body a living shield. His muscles rippled, his golden coat gleamed under the torchlight, and his roars rang louder than the hyena's laughter. At last, the pack broke. Defeated, bleeding, they slunk back into the tall grass, their cries fading into the night. The cheetah stood trembling, sides heaving, his mouth stained red, his eyes blazing with fury and triumph. Then he turned. Slowly, gently, he padded back to the veranda where the old dog lay. He lowered his head, nuzzling his guardian's muzzle, purring softly despite the wounds striping his body. The dog licked his face weakly, his cloudy eyes filled with pride. The villagers watched in silence. None could deny what they had seen. The cheetah, born wild, raised in doubt, had chosen his side without hesitation. He was no prisoner of instinct, no predator waiting to turn. He was a son defending his father. That night, no one spoke of fear. They spoke only of loyalty and how sometimes the fiercest heart is not measured by bloodline, but by love. The seasons shifted, and the bond between them grew even as time pressed its heavy hand upon the old dog. His muzzle turned white, his eyes clouded, and each step became a struggle. Once he had led the cheetah through the savannah, teaching patience and caution. But now it was the cheetah who slowed his pace, always walking just beside him, matching his limp with careful grace. The villagers watched this strange pair with reverence. The dog had become frail, yet never alone. When he lay down to rest, the cheetah curled around him, shielding him from the chill of night. When the dog rose to drink from the shallow wells, the cheetah followed, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. Their roles had reversed, but the bond was unchanged, two lives tethered together by something stronger than instinct. As the years wore on, the dog spent more time beneath the shade of the acacia tree, his body too tired to wander far. The cheetah, swift and strong, began to hunt alone, streaking across the grasslands with the speed of wind and shadow. But each hunt ended the same way, with him returning, dragging meat back to the tree, laying it before the dog as though paying tribute. The villagers whispered in awe, calling it devotion, calling it love. One evening, as the sky burned crimson and gold, the dog lay with his head resting against the cheetah's flank. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed. The cheetah licked his muzzle gently, rumbling a soft purr that trembled like a lullaby. The villagers gathered quietly, sensing what was coming. When the sun slipped below the horizon, the dog exhaled one last time. His body stilled, his tail no longer stirred. For a long moment, the cheetah stayed frozen, pressing his head against his guardian's side, listening for the heartbeat that had always been there. When silence answered, a sound burst from his chest, a cry unlike any roar, low and mournful, echoing across the savannah. It was grief, raw and unguarded, a sound that carved itself into the hearts of all who heard it. Through the night, the cheetah kept vigil. He lay across the earth, his body curved protectively around the lifeless form of his friend. At dawn, when the villagers came to bury the dog beneath the acacia, the cheetah did not leave. He paced, circled, and lay upon the mound of earth, guarding it with a devotion that broke every rule of nature. Days turned into weeks. Though he returned to the savannah, the cheetah always came back to that tree, lowering his head in quiet reverence. The villagers grew to see it not as grief, but as a covenant, proof that bonds of love endure beyond breath, beyond time, even beyond species. The dog had raised him as his own, and now, in every paw print pressed into the dust, in every glance back at the acacia tree, the cheetah carried that love forward, written into the wild as surely as the wind.